Hi everyone. I gave a talk yesterday about what is less friendly Scrum, and it was 1 hour and 43 minutes, believe it or not. We had lots of comments in the live stream, which is great, but I want to do a slightly shorter version today, something that might be a bit more digestible. Maybe you just want to get the summary. You don't want to have the long talk. I still recommend you look at the longer version, but let's get started. So, less stands for large scale scrum. There's an E in the middle just to make a word out of it. More with less. And more with less, its primary objective or direction probably like is to improve adaptability or adaptiveness. I prefer the word adaptiveness because that's actually you're adaptive already. Delivering more customer value with the real focus on the customer and the end user. And what you kind of get for free, I think, is you get increased inspiration of employees, stakeholders, shareholders, customers, end users. And in order to get there, we use an experimentation mindset. So you get more experimentation. It's not just about adapting our current products, but also maybe discovering some new products, finding that next curve, as Guy Kawasaki often says in his famous TED Talk. Large scale Scrum has a whole product focus, so we tend not to have products that are about like internal systems or an external customer end user would understand what you meant when you mentioned the product. You make that as broad as practical, I guess, as practically possible. Instead of doing the wrong thing righter, we try to do the right thing and then do that righter. So we're trying to be more effective. Efficiency can lead you to doing the wrong thing righter if you're doing the wrong thing. It's top down and bottom up from an adoption point of view. So managers really go see what's going on. Fantastic book called The Lean Manager. Recommend you look at it by Ballet and Ballet. And the managers don't just really go see, but they fix the system. So in large scale Scrum, we recognize managers as an optional role. So if you have managers, they're there really to fix the system and to help improve the system with the teams. It's top down and bottom up. So from the bottom, you'll have technical excellence in terms of how we do our work. It's based on volunteering, so instead of people being voluntold and you're nominated to join this team, we tend to maybe go through a workshop. Craig Larman talks about using informed consent. You don't have to use that approach, but it's an approach I like, where you might invite maybe 35 people to training, understanding the system that they're operating, and then maybe at the end of that week, maybe only 25 people out of that 35 want to go forward, and that's completely okay, because we want to respect the people who want to go ahead. We want to respect the people who aren't really ready for this at this point in time. Large scale Scrum is all about self-managing teams, so there are zero coordinating roles. There are no coordinating Scrum Masters. So if you think a Scrum Master coordinates, that is not the less friendly approach. So more like a coach, really, more like kind of like a sports coach. And we have slice of cake teams. So in a lot of organizations, you might have layer of cake teams. You've got component platform teams. Got limited business value, if any business value coming out of those teams, unless you integrate that work with other teams. So in large scale Scrum, we like to restructure the system so that we have slice of cake teams, which will mean reorganizing your teams to deliver value with a whole product view. And talk more about that later on when we look at Scrum. In terms of the continuous improvement, there's continuous improvement towards some kind of perfection goal. When you've got hundreds or thousands of people, maybe the perfection goal is having a definition of done. That means potentially shippable product, because when you've got thousands of people, there might still be some work that needs to be done after the sprints, like hardening testing or whatever. So there's continuous empirical loop to try and expand your definition of done over time, so that at the end of every sprint, you can actually release the product if you decide to do that. Of course, when you've got less than 8 teams, your definition of done should by default be potentially shippable. I'm talking about situations where you're talking about, say, less huge, where that's the larger framework, which you should avoid if you can. You only go there when our heads hurt, and when the basic less framework is we're struggling with it too much. One of the things I really like about less is its focus on multi-learning. So multi-learning is about learning additional technical skills, also learning additional business skills, so business domain knowledge. So just because we need business domain knowledge on the team doesn't mean we need a team product owner. We do not support the idea of team product owners in large scale Scrum. There's only one product owner for the product who's got a whole product focus. When you've got a huge product, Yes, we can have area owners, but as such there's still only one product owner, and that's a really, really important point. And it's also supported by a wonderful community, really active community, the Large Scale Scrum community, very well organised, and really good people involved in that community. So if you're interested in looking at Large Scale Scrum, have a look at the website less.works, LESS.works, to see if there's some practitioner that might be near you that can help you with that. I want to also talk about as well about some of the mindset that you might need to adopt when you're thinking about large scale Scrum. So projects are okay, but we structure it in a different way. I'll talk about that when I get to the next flip. So we focus more on products and customer jobs that need to be done. You might still have projects, but that doesn't mean you need to have project teams for Scrum teams specifically for projects. You can feed those projects into existing Scrum teams. Instead of specialist roles, we look at real teams. So the example I gave yesterday was Liverpool Football Club. I'm not a fan. I'm a fan of Man United, but I have to admire Liverpool in the way they have a team that's really working well, and they didn't talk about what's the star player we can buy kind of thing, kind of mentality that you see actually in my former club Man United. I think that's why they're not doing so well. Also resource thinking as well. So instead of resource thinking, we aim for people thinking, about having a supportive organization for people. Instead of organizing around layers of cake, we organize around slices of cake that are focused on the customer. In a lot of companies we forget about the customer. We talk about internal stuff, and the external customer is lost in the conversation. Instead of independent teams, we've got cross-team cooperation or cross-team collaboration, with potentially with some expert mentoring, because the benefit of those layers of cake is you do have experts in their particular layers, but the slice of cake teams can be supported by experts, and those experts can be seated within the teams as well. Also, instead of, for the software people out there, instead of coordinating to integrate, it's more coordinating through integration, so continuous integration behavior as opposed to tooling. And instead of many small fake products, you have a few broad products that the external customer understands. So there are some of the principles behind large scale Scrum. You find lots more information on the website less.works. I now want to show what Scrum looks like from a less friendly context. You'll see a few things that are probably familiar. One of them would be that, for example, there's a product owner, and she's in charge of the entire product backlog. She has to engage with stakeholders, like external customers and end users. There's some internal projects that need to be done, like COVID-19, Brexit, maybe some regulation. And we do have projects, they still exist. But what we can do is we can feed those projects into the product backlog. And as you can see here, the product owner didn't say yes to everyone, because the COVID-19 person got some items into the backlog, but not all of them. And same for these other project managers, and actually same as well for the external customers and end users. Thankfully, this product owner is reasonably customer centric, so there's a lot of green items from the external customers and end users in the backlog. I don't like to see a big block of our product backlog taken over by a particular project, because it just clogs up value. There must be some items within each of these projects that are more valuable than others. So we expect the product owner to optimize that value. The product owner needs to articulate a vision that's clear to all stakeholders, and manage the statement, not manage, but engage with the stakeholders so that we understand what they're thinking. And then as such, every sprint, the team will select work in consultation with the product owner and bring some of those items in from this product backlog into the sprint. And this is a visualization of a sprint backlog here. And when items come from a sprint, from a product backlog into a sprint, they disappear from the top of the product backlog and they come into the forecast here. And you might think, well, are they still product backlog items? Well, we still call them product backlog items, even though they're no longer on the product backlog, because that's where they came from. And you can see here in this case that the colors are representing the source of the stakeholders. So there's a pink item from COVID-19, there's a couple of green items from external customers, there's a Brexit item in here for people in the UK, and maybe people dealing with the UK, and then there's a red item here as well for this financial regulation thing as well. And so this is a visualization of the sprint backlog. Sprint backlog is a visualization of you got the forecast and you've got the plan to deliver the forecast towards the sprint goal. And the team is kind of using that like a mini North Star within the sprint. And that North Star is then iterating towards the overall product vision. Every sprint the team delivers a done increment. In Scrum.org we say if you say Scrum in 2 words, it's done increment, because the definition of done in Scrum is a central concept. And when you don't have things like technical standards or some product quality considerations in your definition of done, then we kind of lose some transparency about what's really in the increment. Is it really done? Do we really comply with all our internal rules? Have we really delivered a high quality product? So definition of done is absolutely central to Scrum, and also central to Scrum is a self-organizing, self-managing team. Self-managing is probably the word we use in large scale Scrum more than self-organizing, because it's defined. And this team is multi-learning. So you got people with different skills. The color represents the skill that they have, and then you can see inside their heads they're different colors because they're learning some additional skills. So there's an expectation on the Scrum team that you learn additional skills. So you can have UX, analysis skills, testing skills, and so on. That doesn't mean you have to have single skill specialists. There's an expectation you might need all of those skills, but each team member will try to coach, mentor, teach other people on the team about what they do to people who are willing to learn that those skills. This team, the development team is known as in Scrum, and large scale Scrum we just call this team, is supported by a Scrum Master who acts like a coach, has different stances. A mentor gives answers, a coach asks questions, because you might have the answers yourselves to figure out the problem. You might own the solution more if you're coached. There might be some teaching moments as well, because sometimes we don't know what we don't know, so sometimes the Scrum Master can help there. And in large scale Scrum we expect this Scrum Master role to be full-time. And we also expect this person to be technical, so they can coach the team on some technical skills to improve their technical skills. We expect there to be business domain knowledge and technical knowledge and skill within the self-organizing, self-managing team, I should have said. What else is interesting here? Well, the whole team, the team in large scale Scrum, the Scrum Master and the product owner, they support the Scrum values: focus, openness, courage, commitment, and respect. In large scale Scrum, there is no concept of Scrum team because it's about multi-team Scrum. So if you've got multiple teams all working together within the same product, that's the only time when you need a framework like LeSS, maybe more than 3 or more teams, maybe. Then when we say multi-team Scrum, you have multiple teams with multiple Scrum Masters and one product owner. The reason we don't like the idea of Scrum team within LeSS is because we have this illusion that every team needs its own product owner, and that creates all sorts of problems. One of the problems is best illustrated on the product backlog here, because you can see here there's an item on the backlog that's worth $2,000. There's another item here worth $1,500. There's another item down here worth $2. And let's say this is Team A, but Team X, they just have their own filter and they're looking at this part of the backlog because they have their own team product owner, and so that's all they can see, these items. So they're working the $2 item, but Team A is working the $2,000 item, and they can't even afford to work on the $1,500 item. So when you have team product owners, you cannot even see, the team can't even see that they're not working on what's highest value to the company. So this is why we prefer there to be one product owner for the entire product, and also for each team to have a whole product view, so that when the team is doing product backlog refinement with external customers and end users and other stakeholders, when they're clarifying the problems rather, we expect that after doing multi-team refinement, not just Team A but maybe Team C and Team D, they do the refinement together because they're working in the same part of the product, but they would even look at what Team X, Team Y, Team Z are doing, so that they get full appreciation of what's going on across the product. Because you never know, we might get some cognitive diversity, and maybe Team A will have some eureka moment when somebody from Team X notices something that hadn't been noticed before. I mentioned the optional manager role already. That's made specific in large scale Scrum, and this is a reference here to the kind of insights making framework. I talked about that a few times on some previous talks, and I didn't really dig into it in the long talk last night on less Friendly Scrum, but I do talk about it on other talks. So what's different about less friendly Scrum from Scrum. So in Scrum, we normally have a sprint. It's 1 to 4 weeks long. You've got your sprint planning, topic 1, topic 2. You've got your daily Scrum. You've got your sprint review. You've got your sprint retrospective. So what's different about less friendly Scrum? First of all, if you have multiple teams working on the same product, then every team will have the same sprint length. Every team will have the same sprint length. So in other patterns, you might, like Nexus, for example, if there was a 4-week sprint for the product, then some teams might be spinning around in 2 weeks or 1 week inside that 4-week sprint. Unless we don't do that, every team on the product has the same sprint cycle. They're all going the same cycle, because we don't want people from Team A looking for some help from Team X and they're not available because they're in sprint planning. It's just that's one of the reasons why we want people to be available at the same time, basically. That's one of the differences. Another difference is if you have multi-team Scrum. This is, by the way, only if you have multi-team Scrum. This doesn't apply if you only have one team. If you have one team, just use Scrum as per the Scrum Guide and as per Scrum Direct training or Scrum Alliance training, right? So, but in less friendly Scrum, one of the things that we make people aware of is that sprint planning might be broken up at scale, because topic 1 is where you kind of agree the sprint goal or what the objectives you're trying to achieve in the sprint. Topic 2 is where you create the sprint backlog. You know, how are we actually going to do this work. So even though it's one event in Scrum, it's actually broken up into 2 separate events in large scale Scrum. So that's one thing we make people aware of, because different audience basically for different parts. Because you might have representatives from teams up here. You could have all the teams, but representatives, you might have customers and end users in there and all that. But down here it's more development teams and maybe still consulting with some of those other stakeholders as well. The daily Scrum is the same as you have in Scrum. The sprint review is pretty much the same. The retrospective has a slight difference in that each team does their own retrospective, but then at the start of the following sprint there will probably be an overall retrospective including managers. So we talk about how we're going to make this system, better. In addition to that, I already mentioned the Scrum Master is full-time, usually technical. The team has a real emphasis on multi-learning. It is a slice of cake team, not a layer of cake team. And in terms of coordination, they don't rely on anybody to do the coordination except themselves. They just talk to each other. And there's a few guides in the large scale Scrum book, like having mentors, for example, component mentors, layer of cake mentors in my language, or for example, scouts. You send someone to another team's daily Scrum to find out what's going on. You can use, just use trunk-based development, for example, so you can see that someone else is the same code checked out if you're a software developer. But essentially, the teams just talk to each other to resolve problems that need to be solved and to clarify anything that needs to be clarified. The Scrum Master supports the team and also supports the product owner to optimize the value. This team in a less friendly context would have more delegated responsibility from the product owner to, in product backlog 5, to clarify problems with the stakeholders, including customers, end users, and the various internal project stakeholders. So the product owner acts like a matchmaker between the team and the stakeholders, primarily external, ideally, if you've got an externally facing product. So the product owner doesn't even need to be at product backlog of 5. The product owner does not clarify requirements. The team, if anything, will clarify the problems to be solved with the stakeholders who are talking about that problems that they think need to be solved. In large scale Scrum, the sprint goal is de-emphasized. It's still recognized. You still have it if you want to. That's absolutely fine. In fact, it's mandatory in Scrum, but it's not emphasized so much when in large scale Scrum, particularly when you get to large scale Scrum huge. It just gets really difficult to have a sprint goal that lots of teams can kind of corral around. In Nexus, of course, which supports up to 9 teams, there's a Nexus sprint goal. So I'd imagine in the LeSS framework as well, people would be using the sprint goal, but it just gets a bit more tricky as you're getting into more than 8 or 9 teams when you go to a larger framework like Nexus Plus or less huge. They're the essential differences. So when people are coming into a company that I'm working in, and if, say, I'm trying to influence the thinking in terms of agility, and if Scrum is on the agenda, and there are multiple teams working on products, I just like to avoid a situation where trainers or coaches come in and they teach that it's okay for this person to be coordinating, which is not the case. Where they teach that you need a team product owner because you need subject matter, and that's not the case. Where the team doesn't need to be clarifying problems with customers and end users, that's not the case. Where the team doesn't need to basically be adaptive to such an extent that it's broadening its definition of the product, it's broadening its understanding of the product, so it's not stuck in its own little silo, in its own little filter of the backlog, that the team in product backlog refinement not only will work with other teams in the same area of the product, but will also try to get an understanding of what else is going on in other areas of the product, so that we're increasing the flexibility of these teams over time to help with that. Another thing as well, one of the coping strategies in large scale Scrum as well is to have travelers to support Just Talk. You can ask, is it okay if I join your team? And if they say yes, you can join, and this team benefit from your skills, and this is kind of a two-way thing. And so overall, this team is getting more flexible over time. We don't want that traveler thing happening all that regularly. I would say maybe every 6 months is probably the sweet spot. Wouldn't do that all the time. Wouldn't be introducing new people every sprint, every week, and all that. Just messes things up. But it just keeps it injects enough energy to avoid the team getting stale after a few years. So better to maybe just do it every 6 months or so, even 12 months or so. They are the key differences. So in terms of projects, we don't set up Scrum teams, or teams rather in the LeSS context, teams for projects. Instead, what we like is to have a long-term stable team and just keep feeding them. The product owner will engage with the stakeholders, external and internal, and they will agree what work needs to be done. And the team will be selecting work in consultation with the product owner toward iterating towards some vision, continuously improving every sprint in terms of getting closer to their perfection goal, almost impossible perfection vision, and striving to comply with the Scrum values. And of course, the most important message of all is empiricism. This team will learn empirically what they should be doing, and so to improve empiricism you need transparency, which means that if people want to know how things are going on, rather than giving kind of dashboard reports and stuff like that, you want to find out what's going on, come to the sprint review, have a look at the product, go and see how customers and end users are using the product, go and see what's happening with the teams and what kind of problems they're having. And we expect managers to be fixing problems, not just aware of the problems, helping teams to fix problems. In fact, in large scale Scrum, Friendly Scrum, managers often fix a lot of impediments because they often have more power than Scrum Masters to do so, obviously with the support of Scrum Masters. Another little thing as well I just want to introduce as a last point is that in large scale Scrum there's also this concept of taking a bite, which I think is similar to kind of running an experiment. So it could be running an experiment on understanding some problem more, or it could be understanding a technology more, or it could be quite simply just getting started, because sometimes you go at a complex problem, when you kind of start scraping out you discover more. So just take a little bite out of it and just see what you learn. And I think that's a really nice little thing in large scale Scrum as well. So you will find that there will be lots of items in the product backlog that won't be just about delivering work. It will also be about running some experiments, taking a bite, understanding more, trying to discover new products, new customers, and so on. So if you want to find out more about this, it's a longer version of this video, but this is my attempt at a shorter version. Thank you very much for watching. Over now. Thank you.